The old clock hanging crookedly on the gymnasium wall ticked loudly in the tense silence. It read 10:15 a.m., but for the hundreds of teenagers packed inside Jefferson High School's gymnasium, time had already shattered into chaos. A deafening bang echoed through the air, a single gunshot that fractured the ordinary hum of a Wednesday morning. Then came the screams, high-pitched, desperate, drowning in panic. The smell of sweat and fear mingled with the metallic tang of blood. Dust stirred from the disturbed ceiling tiles as the lights flickered, plunging some corners into brief darkness. The chaos was suffocating. Bodies fell. Shouts of "Get down! Run!" ricocheted off the cold, concrete walls. For many, the nightmare began not with the gunfire but with the chilling realization that the safety they had taken for granted was gone. The massacre at Jefferson High wasn't just another story about senseless violence. It was a dark unraveling of deep-rooted failures, of broken trust, of silenced voices, and of a community wrestling with secrets it wasn't ready to confront. Jefferson, a small town in the American Midwest, had long been the kind of place people described as quaint or friendly. White picket fences lined tidy streets where kids played baseball in the evenings and neighbors greeted one another with a familiar wave. The high school was the heart of this community. Jefferson High had served generations with its red brick walls, proud football teams, and a mural in the cafeteria depicting the town's history. Farmers, factory workers, families, all weaving the fabric of a shared past. On this chilly October morning, the leaves had turned fiery shades of orange and gold, drifting lazily to the sidewalks. A faint chill hung in the air as students entered the school, their breaths forming small clouds. Some wore hoodies, others carried laptops and textbooks, all chatting and joking like any other day. Inside, the school smelled of polished floors, printer ink, and the faint residue of last night's cafeteria cleaning. Teachers moved between classrooms, readying lessons. The bell rang sharply, signaling the start of second period. Among the crowd was Emily Parker, a 17-year-old senior. She wore a gray jacket over her worn band t-shirt, her brown hair tucked behind one ear. Her sketchbook rested in her backpack, filled with charcoal portraits and watercolor dreams she hoped to turn into a portfolio for art school applications. Emily's best friend, Marcus, no relation to the shooter, bumped her shoulder playfully. "You ready for the art show after school?" Emily smiled, a spark in her eyes. More nervous than ready. "But yeah, I think it'll be great." They passed under a banner that read, "Welcome to Homecoming Week." The halls buzzed with excitement for the upcoming dance and the rivalry football game on Friday. But beneath the surface of this youthful optimism, a darker current ran. Marcus Reed, the former student who would later be identified as the shooter, had once been one of the kids walking these halls. But unlike Emily, his journey was marked by isolation. Marcus had dropped out months earlier after a string of disciplinary problems. His home life was a tangled mess of poverty, neglect, and fractured relationships. The quiet desperation in his eyes spoke of battles unseen. Teachers whispered about him behind closed doors. The troubled kid, the loner, the one who never fit in. Few noticed how deep his wounds ran. Rumors of bullying swirled like smoke. Marcus was an easy target, awkward, withdrawn, and perceived as strange. On social media, he was mocked, ignored, or worse, threatened. School counselors had tried to reach out, but Marcus refused help, slipping further into silence. Unknown to most, Marcus had connected with a group online, a hidden community of disenfranchised youths sharing dark thoughts and dangerous ideas. The messages were encrypted, hidden behind layers of code and private chat rooms. In these shadows, rage and resentment fermented into obsession. That morning, the air was thick with the scent of brewing coffee and freshly sharpened pencils. Teachers handed out worksheets. Students murmured answers. Marcus slipped quietly through the side entrance, avoiding cameras and security guards distracted by a minor fire drill in the morning. His coat was heavy despite the mild weather, concealing the weapons inside. He moved with a cold, mechanical purpose. There was no hesitation, no doubt, only a grim resolve. Inside the gymnasium, students were gathered for an assembly. The bleachers were packed, and the noise level had risen to a murmur of laughter and chatter. Suddenly, the first shot tore through the air. Panic exploded. Students dove under benches. Some screamed and ran blindly toward exits. The smell of gunpowder burned the nose. Teachers shouted orders, herded kids into classrooms, locked doors. Amid the chaos, Emily found herself trapped near the front, crouched beside a terrified freshman. Her fingers trembled as she tried to calm the child. The floor shook beneath them, footsteps pounding, cries echoing. Some classmates tried to call 911, their voices breaking. As emergency services flooded the scene, an investigation began that would uncover truths more harrowing than anyone imagined. At first, the story seemed straightforward. A lone shooter, a tragic outburst of violence. But as detectives sifted through digital trails and interviewed survivors, they uncovered an ominous web. Encrypted chats on Marcus's devices revealed a disturbing pattern of radicalization. The group he belonged to preached violent retribution against those they deemed responsible for their pain. Not just peers, but the adults, the system, and the community that ignored them. More alarmingly, emails surfaced between school administrators and local officials discussing complaints about bullying and safety concerns. Complaints that were quietly dismissed or buried. An internal memo hinted at budget cuts that gutted the school's security upgrades and counseling programs. Whispers spread about deals made behind closed doors. A decision to keep the school's problems off the record to preserve the town's image. It became clear that Marcus wasn't just a troubled teen acting out. He was a symptom of a much larger failure. Survivors began to share their stories. Mr. Thompson, the janitor, recounted how he threw himself in front of fleeing students, taking bullets meant for others. Mrs. Garcia, the history teacher, locked her classroom door and comforted a terrified group of freshmen. Her voice steady even as her hands shook. Emily's own bravery shone as she shielded her friend and helped others find safe refuge. Her sketchbook left abandoned on the gym floor, but the losses were staggering. 23 students and staff lost their lives. Dozens more were wounded physically and emotionally. Jefferson's tight-knit community was left shattered. Memorials sprung up on the courthouse lawn, candles flickering in the cold wind. Parents held vigils searching for answers. But beneath the grief was a growing anger. How had this happened? Why had warning signs been ignored? And most importantly, who was truly responsible? As the investigation deepened, more secrets surfaced. A shadowy network protecting its own. A town afraid to face the truth. Some feared that exposing these secrets would destroy Jefferson completely, but others were determined to fight for justice. The story was far from over. The motive behind the massacre was not just rage or despair. It was the unmasking of a community's darkest secrets. What will be revealed next? In the days after the massacre, the streets of Jefferson were heavy with silence. Stores closed early. People moved like ghosts, eyes red from tears and sleepless nights. Parents clutched photographs of missing children, holding tight to memories that felt suddenly fragile and unreal. The media descended, cameras flashing, reporters calling for answers. Yet the wounds felt too raw to voice. Inside the town hall, the mayor convened an emergency meeting, the kind that would decide the fate of Jefferson's reputation and future. Journalists pressed for information, but officials carefully crafted statements that spoke of healing, unity, and support, leaving many feeling like the truth was being papered over. Yet behind the polished speeches, whispers of corruption and negligence began to leak. Detective Lisa Monroe, a seasoned investigator from the state police, was assigned to lead the inquiry into the massacre. Lisa had seen tragedy before, but this case was different, layered with complexity, rife with shadows. Her first step was to interview students, teachers, and staff. She sat in sterile rooms, listening to stories of fear, courage, and confusion. One recurring theme was the silence before the storm. Multiple students spoke of Marcus Reed as a broken figure, withdrawn and angry. But they also spoke of how bullying and harassment had been overlooked, a pain they too shared but felt powerless to change. Lisa noted how often students mentioned the same few teachers who had turned a blind eye or dismissed concerns. But beyond individuals, The investigation soon uncovered a system that had prioritized appearances over safety. Among the documents seized was a cache of emails and memos between school administrators and the Jefferson County Board of Education. One email read, "Please ensure this does not become public knowledge. We cannot afford a scandal that damages the district's reputation." Another memo discussed cutting funds for counseling programs, stating, "The budget constraints require prioritization. Student mental health initiatives must be scaled back." Further, anonymous whistleblowers came forward with allegations that security concerns raised by teachers were ignored or suppressed. Lisa realized the massacre was not only a failure of one individual but a collective failure, a system riddled with negligence and willful blindness. The investigation dug deeper into Marcus's past. His home life was revealed to be chaotic. An absent father, a mother working multiple jobs, and a younger sister caught in the turmoil. Neighbors recalled hearing shouting matches, but no calls were ever made to social services. School records showed Marcus struggled academically and socially, often labeled a disciplinary problem, without understanding the root causes. Therapists who attempted to help were met with silence or defiance. His social media presence painted a portrait of growing anger and isolation, but it also revealed something more disturbing: connections to extremist forums online. Encrypted chats revealed conversations about retribution, power, and revolution, a toxic echo chamber feeding a dark ideology. Lisa began to understand that Marcus's act was not merely a product of bullying, but a violent expression of deep alienation and radicalization. Cyber experts traced Marcus's contacts to a clandestine online community. The group, calling themselves the Reclaimers, attracted disaffected youths nationwide. They shared manifestos, violent fantasies, and strategies to strike back against perceived enemies, schools, governments, and society at large. Within this group, Marcus found a sense of belonging he lacked in real life. The investigation revealed that some members of the Reclaimers had been involved in other violent acts or plots. This revelation suggested the massacre at Jefferson was part of a wider, sinister trend, orchestrated not just by a lone individual but by a broader movement. Meanwhile, Marcus's family was thrust into the brutal spotlight. His mother, Linda Reed, gave tearful interviews expressing shock and sorrow. "I never imagined he could do something like this," she said. "He was hurting, but I didn't know how to help." Old friends painted a complex portrait: a boy who sometimes showed kindness and humor but was increasingly consumed by anger and resentment. Emily Parker, still recovering, reflected on how little she truly knew Marcus. "We all saw him as just a ghost in the halls," she said quietly. Maybe if someone had reached out differently. As Jefferson began the painful process of healing, survivors grappled with trauma that would last a lifetime. Counselors worked tirelessly, and community groups formed to support families. Yet the wounds went deeper than physical scars. Trust was fractured, faith in authority shattered. Parents demanded accountability, teachers questioned their own roles, and the town faced an uncomfortable reckoning. Not everyone wanted the full truth exposed. Some residents, fearful of the economic and social consequences, pushed to move past the tragedy quickly. Others, driven by pain and anger, called for sweeping reforms and justice. At town meetings, heated debates erupted about gun control, school safety, mental health funding, and the role of government. Behind the scenes, some officials lobbied to control the narrative, fearing the massacre would brand Jefferson forever. Detective Monroe uncovered troubling leads: unexplained phone calls between school officials and private security firms, missing surveillance footage, and inconsistencies in official reports. Was someone trying to hide more than just negligence? Who benefited from the silence? What secrets were still buried beneath Jefferson's polished exterior? Late one night, Lisa received an anonymous tip, a message warning her to stop digging before it's too late. The note included cryptic references to a powerful network protecting its interests. As shadows lengthened over Jefferson, the detective realized the investigation was no longer just about one shooter or a single failure. It was about exposing a dangerous web of deceit, a conspiracy that reached far beyond the school walls. Lisa's next moves could change everything, or put her directly in harm's way. The anonymous tip had cracked open a door that many wanted to keep locked. Lisa dug into Jefferson's financial records and internal communications, uncovering a maze of deceit. Contracts with private security firms had been manipulated, with key personnel deliberately downplaying the need for adequate school protection. Certain officials had ignored multiple safety audits to cut costs, keeping the town's image pristine at the expense of students' lives. More disturbingly, Lisa found evidence of efforts to erase surveillance footage from the day of the massacre, footage that could have revealed lapses in response time and possibly helped apprehend accomplices. The net widened. Several high-ranking administrators and board members were implicated in a cover-up aimed at protecting themselves and the town's reputation. With this new evidence, Lisa and federal prosecutors prepared for a reckoning. Public hearings were held, exposing the depth of negligence and betrayal. Families of victims spoke out, their voices raw but resolute. "We trusted you to keep our children safe," one mother cried. "You chose convenience over their lives." The town was forced to confront its darkest secrets. Meanwhile, Marcus Reed's trial became a national spectacle. Psychologists testified about his trauma, isolation, and radicalization, but ultimately, the jury held him accountable for the massacre. He was convicted on multiple counts of murder and attempted murder, receiving a life sentence without parole. His sentencing sparked mixed emotions. Some saw it as justice, others as a tragic end to a life lost too soon. The broader trials of officials followed. Several were indicted for criminal negligence, conspiracy to cover up safety violations, and obstruction of justice. The private security firm's executives faced charges for falsifying reports and endangering public safety. Sentences ranged from fines and probation to prison terms. Jefferson slowly began to heal. The school implemented sweeping reforms, upgraded security, expanded counseling, and new policies emphasizing student welfare. Community groups formed to foster dialogue about mental health, bullying, and violence prevention. Memorials were built, not just for those lost, but as reminders of the lessons learned. For Emily Parker, healing meant finding hope through creativity. Her artwork, once a private refuge, became a public voice. She organized exhibits raising awareness about school violence and mental health, turning pain into purpose. Her friendship with survivors deepened, united by shared loss and a commitment to change. Detective Monroe stood at the site of the old gymnasium, now a peaceful garden. She reflected on the massacre, the secrets uncovered, and the lives forever altered. Justice had been served, but the scars remained, a stark reminder of the cost of silence and neglect. As the wind rustled the leaves, she vowed that Jefferson's story would never be forgotten, and that vigilance must never waver. The tragedy at Jefferson High shook a nation and sparked vital conversations about safety, mental health, and accountability. Though justice was achieved, the story underscored a painful truth. The cost of ignoring warning signs is devastating. It challenged communities everywhere to listen, to act, and to protect their most vulnerable. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth true crime stories that reveal the hidden truths behind headline events. Your support helps us bring justice to light and honor the voices of those affected. Have thoughts or questions about this case? Drop a comment below. We want to hear your perspective. And remember, awareness and action can help prevent tragedies like this. Stay informed, stay vigilant, and never underestimate the power of speaking up. Thank you for watching.